Hello and welcome to Full Chat. I haven't prepared an intro this time because every time I do, we spend 10 minutes doing tech issue support at the beginning anyway. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully you can hear my voice and I'll wait for the chat to tell me if there's any problems. If you can hear my voice, you're going to hear me tell you the things we're going to talk about tonight. And they include the merry-go-round of team principals in Formula 1, with loads of team principals just randomly changing team on the same day, which we probably weren't really expecting. We're also going to be talking about Ford's potential move back into Formula 1 alongside Red Bull. We're going to be talking about Barcelona's change back to what I believe is the old final corner, which I think we're going to agree is a good thing. And we're also going to have a little history lesson with Alex and Brad. And if everyone can hear me, that will be a great thing. But first of all, I should ask the question we ask every week, which is, did Alex win the football? So I'll bring in Alex to tell us, did you win the football?
We did win the football. We played earlier, and we played on a 5-a-side pitch instead of a 9-a-side pitch, and I was amazing. So I need to eat fish and chips, and play on a 5-a-side pitch if I want to be good at football. It seems.
Okay, good, well done. That's the second time in a row you've won.
Third time in a row. I don't think I've lost in a week that I've come on the show.
Okay, so I'm just going to fix a minor technical thing before we get started. And that's just the way the chat is being displayed. And that's something I've just noticed because we actually changed the way the chat works for this week. And it's the first time we've had lots of people in there. I think I can fix that quite easily. So bear with me, guys.
With technical things that aren't audio.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. This is a minor thing. So compared to what we've had in the past, I'm willing to go with this. So any minute now, I'm hoping we're going to see the chat actually go behind Alex instead of in front of him, which should be about... No, I've just managed to completely lose the chat. That's okay. That's okay. As long as... I can fix this. I can fix this one.
At least the audio works.
So it sounds like 100% audio is what people are saying. So I'm going to just literally drag this chat a little bit smaller. Someone taught me this week. If you hold Alt... Oh, that didn't work.
So Tamar in the chat is my niece, who just says Phoebe is better, and Phoebe is my daughter. So no idea what she's talking about there. But,
oh, okay.
Hi, Tamar.
So, was Phoebe not very well then?
Phoebe's fine.
Well, she's talking rubbish then. Right, we're nearly there. We're nearly there.
Fine. No one cares about the chat, Brad. Let's talk about Formula 1.
Okay. I'm just trying to make it so people can actually see it. It is called full chat, and so it needs to be visible, but not visible over your face.
It's only taking up my Twitter handle, which is @AlexVanGene. So go and follow me on Twitter.
It's all right. I fixed it. So let's start off with the team principal merry-go-round, which it just seemed to explode on Twitter. We all thought that Mattia Binotto was leaving Ferrari, and then that happened. Ferrari denied it was going to happen, and then it happened. Yeah, Lastronomy, I actually just tried that alt trick that you taught me yesterday. It didn't work. It just was resizing it differently. Like I say, this show is 50% tech support, 50% Formula One. I think we're going to gain a new audience that are all OBS experts. So, yeah, Binotto left Ferrari, and we all thought for quite a while that it was going to be Fred Vasseur that was going to replace him, because that was just the rumour, and the rumours tend to be true in Formula One quite a lot of the time.
There's no smoke without fire.
Exactly. And that is what happened. Fred Vasseur was then announced as Ferrari team principal and general manager, which is a little bit strange.
No idea what that means. So I always thought team principal was a posh name for general manager of the team anyway, so...
Yeah, we'll talk about the Ferrari managerial situation in a minute. I tell you, let's first of all just work out who went where and why, and then maybe we can give our comments on what we think about those people in those positions. So Binotto out Ferrari, Fred Vasseur from Alfa Romeo Sauber moving across to replace him. That meant that Vasseur's place was empty. That's been filled by Andreas Seidel.
Hasn't been filled by Andreas Seidel. Andreas Seidel is the CEO, not the team principal.
Okay, well, he's
not in that position. He's in a different position. He's moved to the team, but he has moved from his team principal position at McLaren to a CEO role at Alfa Romeo.
Got it. Okay. And then that left the McLaren seat, if you will, open, which has then been filled by Andreas Stella, which is a promotion from within McLaren.
Correct.
And we also, at the same time, had Jost Capito leaving Williams. I don't think we've heard of anyone replacing him, or where he's gone, in fact. Have I missed any of them, Alex?
No, not according to the little graphic I have from F1's Instagram earlier. So we still have Horner at Red Bull. We still have Wolff at Mercedes. It shows Alfa Romeo as vacant, so maybe Capito might go to Alfa.
And for everyone who's wondering why Alex is staring down, he's reading this
sorry. I will be more professional, so I can actually look at the camera at the same time. Then you got Franz Tost still at Alpha Tauri, Mike Crack at Aston Martin, Fred Vasseur now at Ferrari, Andrea Stella at McLaren has his promotion. Schaffnauer. How do you pronounce his first name?
Otmar Safnauer
Otmar
or
Safnauer.
Schaffnauer at Alpine. So he is
And
actually one of the more recent signings to a team, but he's now the 5th longest serving team principal after all this. So he just joined this year, didn't he, Alpine? Moving across
9 months
from Aston Martin. So
and Christian Horner is the longest standing team principal in Formula One. I remember when he came in, and everyone's like, "Wow, he's too young to run an F1 team. You know, he won't last very, very long." But despite what we think of him, he's made a championship-winning team out of that team. Yeah, multiple championship-winning team out of that team.
Yeah, and I think what we tend to see is that team principal, in fact, anyone in any position, but in particular team principals who stay longer seem to end up eventually having more success. And probably the big problem that Ferrari has had in recent years, in like the last decade and a half probably, is this constant revolving door of replacing team principals, and no one ever really gets time to fix problems or implement their own vision for the future. Binotto, okay, Ferrari didn't win the championship this year, but it was still a big improvement over where they have been. And like in as a football manager would be at some teams, he's out the door straight away. And that isn't really how you get long-term success and stability, as we've seen from Red Bull or Mercedes.
I totally agree. I mean, you see, as you just said, we see it in football all the time, which is they don't get one decent season and they're out on their ear. And I just don't agree with it. You need time to build a team around you. You need time to make that team understand your ethos, especially a team who seems as managerially broken as Ferrari do, where they have this horrible blame culture. No one dares say a word. You know, years ago, they booted out their champion, Alain Prost, because he didn't say good things about the car. When you go back and watch the Rush movie, and you got the comment of when Niki Lauda first drove the Ferrari, and he said it was shit. And they said, well, you can't say that. It's a Ferrari. He goes, but it is. And that was very much a fact all the way through Ferrari's history, that if you slag off the team or you slag off the car, you get ousted out, you know, which is why you see the drivers don't say too much. I mean, the last driver who was very outspoken at Ferrari was, guess who? Go on. Who was the last driver that was out? No, don't be silly.
Schumacher.
Fernando Alonso.
Oh, okay.
Because of course it was.
I went too far both sides, didn't I?
You went too far both sides. You know, to be fair, Schumacher never really said anything bad about Ferrari.
Well, that's because the team was good. Yeah, when he was there, the team was good.
But anyway. Seb was still reserved, even for all what Seb went through, and basically he was their main strategist, running the strategy from the car. Even he didn't say too much. It was only when Fernando Alonso himself all over Ferrari and caused all the issues that he likes to cause.
So Connor Edwards in the chat is saying that Jost Capito is retiring. He was due to retire a few years ago, but he was parachuted into Williams to steady the ship. So that makes a bit more sense.
Yes, he binned off. I remember Chris Stevens said something about this earlier. He binned off his retirement plans to join and help out Williams. And I think he has helped Williams. I think he did a good job at Williams. So it's going to be very interesting to see who they get to bring in and fill his boots, because I think they'll have big boots to fill.
We should probably dig into a little bit more about what happened to Seidl at McLaren, because I think a lot of us probably thought he was quite secure there, and he had no reason to go anywhere, and he was like there for the long term, and it seems like he had a really good relationship with Zach Brown. And you've probably read the same, but what I've seen is that actually that McLaren sudden leaving of Seidl was kind of pre-planned. He was due to go at the end of 2025, ahead of Audi coming in as a full-blown works effort in 2026. So he was due to go and join them at the end of a couple of seasons' time. And Brown knew all about that. They'd agreed that. And then when it became clear that that Audi wanted him early, they wanted to get Seidl over early, they approached McLaren, they approached Brown, and Brown essentially asked Andrea Stella, their new team principal, if he'd be happy to move up straight away. And because he said yes, Brown effectively thought, well, let's let everyone go to their permanent home now, and everyone's happy. So he said we could have played gardening leave, but we didn't. So it seems all amicable, really.
That's very sensible and mature, which seems very, very out of place for management moving around in Formula. But no, I hadn't read that. I hadn't heard that. So that's really good, interesting news, because I like Andrea Seidl. He's a very unassuming man. I got a little bit of a story about him. A friend of mine is a very, very big McLaren fan. He's a German guy, a very big McLaren fan. And when Andreas Seidel came in, he was a very big fan, weirdly, of Andreas Seidel. And as I've talked about before, a friend of mine is Will Buxton. And I was telling Will Buxton about how much this guy was a big fan, and he's helped me out with some various different things. And Will Buxton got a hat signed for my friend by Daniel Ricciardo, by Lando Norris, and by Andreas Seidel. And Andreas Seidel told Will Buxton it's the first autograph he had ever signed.
Well, that's nice. That's a nice story. And actually, it's a nice outcome for him because he's effectively returning home. He came to McLaren having been integral in the Audi, I believe, endurance projects, the Le Mans projects, and or was it Porsche? No, it was Porsche, sorry. And now he's going back to the VW group to head up the Audi Formula One effort, and it was kind of an opportunity that's too good to miss, I guess, being headhunted to be the head of this big new Audi works team. When Audi do things in motorsport, they tend to do them properly. So going from Porsche, then to McLaren, then back to Audi, which is part of the same group, and it's obviously German, and I think it's probably quite fitting for him to be the leader there. So everyone happy in their new roles.
Where you say Audi are doing it properly, do you class what they're doing with Sauber as doing it properly?
So, as far as I'm aware, they're building their own engines. They're not doing what Alfa Romeo have done, which is just stick their name on like a title sponsor and brand the team and then use Ferrari engines and a Sauber chassis. I believe Audi, although Sauber will retain some ownership of the team, I believe Audi are, and correct me if I'm wrong, and feel free in the chat if I'm talking rubbish, please correct me, but I believe Audi are buying a large part of the Sauber team, running it entirely themselves, producing their own engines, and being, to all intents and purposes, a genuine works effort. They just haven't made a brand new team from scratch. I know we probably would have all liked that. It's nice to see extra teams come in. I would have loved if we still had Sauber, Alfa Romeo, and Audi as a separate team. But I think the only thing that you'd be questioning there, Alex, of whether it's a proper works effort, is they didn't build the team from scratch. But it's quite normal to kind of buy a team or buy a large part of a team and then run that as a works team.
That wasn't the initial. I don't know if things have changed, but that wasn't initially what was said. It was still going to be run by Peter Sauber and his team. And it was going to be engines with Audi sponsorship. With Audi engines with the team being renamed as Audi.
I think
I don't think they've bought Sauber though. Sauber still exists as an entity.
So Connor Edwards, again, Connor's very, very active in our chat. Connor's always got something good to say. He was also active in my iRacing live stream last night, which I've started back up again now. You
did a live stream last night?
Yeah, it was a test stream. It wasn't. I did do a race in the end, but it wasn't. I wasn't planning it. It was just to make sure
Fuji in the
worked.
F1 car.
I have a lot fewer technical issues on the pod over here than I do doing these pretend podcasts. So I think that's a clue as to one of the reasons as to why I have problems. But anyway, Connor mentions that it's going to be a lot like how BMW was with Sauber in the mid-2000s. So funny, another German manufacturer using the same base team to be their works team. But BMW was very much a works effort. Again, BMW engines, BMW management. I think Audi is going to be pretty much like that. I think it's a big departure from the pretend works efforts we've seen from someone like Alfa Romeo.
Okay.
So I think it's proper. And ultimately they might take full ownership in the end. Who knows?
Yep, and then it's a shame they didn't come in as a full team, because if they came in as a full team, it would have given Andretti more wiggle room to come in as a new team, which is a real shame because it looks like Andretti really, really desperately want to come in, but the teams don't want to split the prize money.
Yeah, everyone seems very against Andretti, don't they?
Is it against Andretti, or is it against another team diluting the pot?
Well, probably a bit of both, I guess. Yeah,
Why would they have something against Andretti? I've never understood that. What's?
I don't know personally, but it just seems like there's a lot more pushback than I'd expect. It seems like everyone's very happy. Everyone in Formula One is very happy with the 10. They say 10 is enough, 10 teams is enough. And I don't know, I think you agree with me. I don't think it is enough.
Nope.
I think 10 teams is a bit too... We need 2 or 3 more You need there to be the real well, they don't even have to be bad, because with the budget cap now, you'd hope that you were not going to have people well off the back. The last time we had new teams coming completely fresh with, I guess it was Virgin or Marussia ultimately, or Mana and Caterham and HRT. The problem there was they were promised a budget cap that then never happened.
Yep.
But now we have a budget cap. So
the budget cap came 10 years too late.
And teams run at a profit now. So you wouldn't have that same problem. So anyway, it is just that there is a finite pot that teams don't want to give up any portion of. I think that's the problem. So maybe we should move on to our next topic, because we've spoken about these team principles for a little while. Let's move on to the news. I think today, maybe it was yesterday it was broken, but I'm pretty sure it's today, that Honda might not be Red Bull's long-term future, despite Honda talking recently about wanting to be part of the new engine regulations, and that Ford might be coming in to take over the Red Bull powertrains, which are effectively Honda engines. How much do you know about this?
I haven't heard this. We probably should mention that I've been out and about working all day, and then went to football early. So me and Brad haven't had our normal catch up that we tend to have before a show, and I've been nowhere near Twitter today. So you're going to have to tell me a bit more information about this.
Well, I'm going to be caught absolutely with knowledge lacking on this subject, but I know that all the major motorsports publications have posted a story today about this. So it's not just a rumour with zero substance. There were photographs on motorsport.com, Autosport, which I appreciate are effectively the same publication, where they had pictures of the old Sauber, talking about Sauber once again, from, I guess, 1995, which had major Red Bull sponsorship, but with a big Ford badge on the side. They were using that as like their stock photo to show this, and it was Ford shows an interest in teaming up with Red Bull. So I thought everything was rosy with Honda. Is this Red Bull trying to get a better deal for their Honda engines going forward? I thought Red Bull has set up their Red Bull Powertrains division, which interestingly enough is right next to Dunelm in Milton Keynes, because Becca and I went there to get some house stuff the other day, which you'll see this weekend when you come round. It's funny, it's in a little... It's just like everywhere in Milton Keynes. It's a kind of mini commercial park. There's probably 10 or 15 of these kind of sections of Milton Keynes. Very unassuming. You turn off a roundabout, obviously, and on your right is like Dunelm and B&M and some other shops, some other kind of outlet stores. Straight in front of you is a little kind of office building, medium-sized, that says Mugen on the side, which is kind of your only clue that there's a Honda presence there. Next door, just like literally across the road, 20, 30 metres away, Red Bull Powertrains. And it's not actually right next to... it's not next to the factory. It's kind of in a different part of Milton Keynes. Not too far away, 5 minutes drive probably, but different part of Milton Keynes to the rest. So anyway, the reason I was saying that is I thought Red Bull were going it alone with their own powertrains. Honda were gone. There was a big farewell Honda, wasn't there? Honda then decided, actually, we want to stay. And so there's increased branding. Honda are kind of coming back, or they never left. And the Red Bull engines are Hondas, aren't they? You know, they just, at the moment, just rebadged.
They never really stopped saying Honda, really. And then they made their big return at the Japanese Grand Prix. Just in time to win the title.
And so if we have Ford coming back, are they going to produce a brand new engine from scratch for the new regulations, or are they going to badge whatever Red Bull produce, which we based on a Honda probably, as a Ford? Who knows?
Will they take on the Honda T, which is a bit weird.
Exactly. That was really my question.
I mean, the problem is does any team want to go through that pain again? It's what everyone so publicly saw Honda go through. And the new engine change isn't that big a change. It's still basically the same ICE, still basically the same turbo unit. They're just dropping the MGU-H, aren't they?
I'm glad you know more about that than me. Steve Greenwood in the chat says Red Bull already work together with the Rally team. Yes, they do. And I don't know what team that is. Is it M Sport? It's the Ford.
I don't follow Rally.
No, neither do I.
Rally's far too scary for
it's
my...
It's cool, but no one follows it. It's not really very It's not very good for TV, is it?
I mean, it looks incredible, but it scares the life out of me, if I'm brutally honest. And it has nothing to do with how fast the cars are going. It all has to do with the bloody stupid spectators who stand in the middle of the track until the car is 4 feet away. And I'm just thinking insta death if anybody makes the smallest mistake. It's like I love watching old clips of Colin McRae when they bent a steering arm and they took the steering arm off the car and bent it back into shape by bashing it with a rock. So you see some awesome,
super cool.
It's very cool, terrifying, and a skill that does not transfer. It's not I mean, you probably hung out with a lot of the rally drivers when you did Race of Champions, didn't you? Yeah. Andre, who was there?
Petter Solberg. He beat me, actually. Petter Solberg was...
such an embarrassment to get beaten by an all-time great rally driver.
By like 2/10 of a second.
Stage.
I think it was less than 2/10 of a second. But yeah, so yeah, rallying great. Anyway, the reason we said that is because Red Bull sponsor that team. So there's already a bit of a connection. And Steve Greenwood says again in the chat, Ford want marketing as far as he's heard. So anyway, we've had messes like this before. We've had teams badging, engine manufacturers sponsoring teams that in quite recent years, engine manufacturers sponsoring teams that have a totally different engine. We've had teams like Honda producing a car and then Mercedes sticking their engine in it and becoming Brawn. We've had, this is the weird one, we've had Honda then becoming Mercedes. The whole facility that is currently Mercedes
was Brawn then
down
Mercedes,
in Brackley, was originally Honda, full factory effort, and then within 2 years it becomes a factory effort of a totally different team. So we've certainly seen this before.
Honda have Honda the team that have bounced in and out of the sport more than any other manufacturer. Definitely in recent years. I don't know how far back they go. I know Renault have bounced in and out of the sport. Mercedes left back in the 60s, didn't they? And then didn't come back until, forget the engine thing, but didn't come back properly. But Honda and Renault, I know, have bounced in and out. Cosworth used to be all conquering, didn't it? Back in the day, back in the Tyrrell days when Jackie Stewart was winning races. What was it, the DFV?
Yeah. So, Cosworth were massive back when you just, lots of people would just buy the same engine. But, I think nowadays... We haven't seen Ford since probably Cosworth. Stewart, Greg Brown talking about Stewart?
Cosworth was in the Lotus.
Yeah, but Cosworth isn't really Ford. Cosworth is a separate independent manufacturer based in Northampton. There were Ford Cosworth, so there were Fords that were kind of tuned by Cosworth or built by Cosworth, but Cosworth
Jaguar
standalone.
Wasn't the Jaguar engine of Ford?
Yeah, I guess so. And then you also had Jordan using Ford in their dying days as well. We've got Missed Apex F1 in the chat, who I can only assume is Spanners out in Spain trolling me, asking why I don't save money on hats by eating a normal amount. I hope you know, Spanners, I've put on loads of weight recently. It's just very, very cold. Hey, I've also got a hot water bottle on my lap. That's how cold it is. And I'm wearing a jumper.
Turn the heating on.
The heating, I think, has been on, but it's just very, very expensive at the moment. So there we go.
Spanners is also texting us, telling you to eat more food. I think he actually means eat more because you're a vegetarian. But
Spanners is saying this from the comfort of his Spanish villa.
Yeah.
So anyway, there we go. That's that topic. That was the Ford topic. So we don't know very much about that, but we'll learn in the coming weeks, I imagine. So next up, hopefully you like my little stupid title there.
Barsel boner. Definitely gives me a boner. I'm very happy about this one.
Obviously that was the play on words there. The final sector in Spain has been crap since they changed it.
God,
why did they change it? Was it for MotoGP? That's why most tracks get ruined. I'm pretty
sure.
Bit of
MotoGP, bit of safety, because it is a really, really fast corner. I think they used to be worried about tyre blowouts. I think a lot of it was MotoGP, but part of me is like, okay, well, just run that configuration for MotoGP and keep the fun stuff for us. Because the problem with that chicane is it is so fiddly. I mean, listen, we've driven it billions of times in the sim, and it's horrible. You have that really, really tight right-hander. You've then got to get over to the right-hand side to take the really, really horrible 90-degree left, then right. Then there's a horrible, massive sausage curb on the exit, and it is just a horrible, horrible sequence. And it completely and utterly negates any overtaking because you're not close to the person in front by the time you get on the power.
Yeah, I agree fully. It's a stupid section for certainly modern Formula One cars. Maybe when they were a bit smaller, it would have been better. But any of those tiny, as Carl Power would call them, flip-flop chicanes, which are just, second gear, very, very slow, fiddly. In the modern era of Formula One, and I mean 2022 onwards, where they have to run the cars super, super stiff, they're not very good at low speed anyway. Let's bring back the long, fast right-hander. The cars can follow more closely now anyway. It'll make DRS more effective down the main straight. The cars will be closer together. And it was just better to watch. And like you say, for the motorbikes, just use the slow layout if you need to, because you can just turn off to the inside. It doesn't matter that there's still a bit of tarmac to the outside. And just before you get your point in, Alex, I just want to point out Jack Scrott in the chat says, "Hi Brad, we won second place at the trivia night in Montpellier together a few weeks ago. Cool to see you on here." Thank you very much for subscribing, Jack.
Hi, Jack.
We smashed that. We very, very nearly won. I got a third place and a second place in the...
Did you get upset? You don't like losing.
Well, I saw that as a victory because I wasn't expecting to get a top 10. Really, it was a music trivia quiz.
I'm surprised they did an English quiz in a French pub.
We were in the Shakespeare, which is Montpellier's English pub. It's a Charles Wells Brewery pub, which is from Bedford, incidentally, which is where I am right now.
If anybody has a quiz team, you want to employ Brad and Becca, because they are a very, very, very good quiz team couple.
We've got good, diverse knowledge, and you just
unless it's about TV, you two seem to suck it. Every time there's TV questions, you two flap.
If it's about Stranger Things,
unless it's about Stranger Things, there's a VR game coming out for Stranger Things.
You told me. I mean, this is not on the Formula One topic.
No, of course not.
I'm happy to chat about it. So, hang on, is this on PC? This game?
Yes. I realised after I sent you that you haven't got VR anymore.
No, I don't. But I mean, it's easy to get it, isn't it? Apart from the money, but
yeah,
it's easy to plug it in.
The thing that stops everything is money.
So I had VR until I then sold it to buy these 3 screens, and I'm pretty sure I had quite a lot of money left over. So that shows you how expensive VR headsets are.
It's because you bought a blooming Steam, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I've forgotten what it was called. So I'm just reading some of the comments here. JR Sprink says, "My hot water bottle is like a cartoon one. Never seen one of them in real life." I mean, this is just what they look like. That's just a hot water bottle. A rabbit has clearly gnawed the end of that, so he must have put that out in a rabbit hutch at one point. Greg Brown says, "Within 24 races, people saying Catalonia sucks. They are rightly afraid." And Connor Edwards again with some great info as always. Safety and apparently an overtaking opportunity is why they changed the layout. MotoGP actually kept using the old one. That's ridiculous. So we've been missing out on a good final corner at Barcelona for ages.
I don't think anyone. Sorry, Brad. I don't think anyone can ever say that chicane created any overtaking.
No, it spread the cars out, if anything.
Absolutely, because the problem is the reason we know it spreads the car out is what happens is when you go into a slow corner, by the time the person ahead of you has got out of the corner, they're already hard on the throttle and pulling away from you by the time you've managed to get yourself out the corner and get on the throttle. So any momentum you may have had, you may have been catching the lap, but because of the way it concertinas you up, and even if they're slow out of the corner, you have to wait for them to get on the throttle to be able to attack them. But the straight's not that long. It is quite a decent length straight, but it's not super long to make up that kind of difference. With that long sweeping right-hander, you can set them up all through the last sector, and then through the middle sector, and then you've got this big opportunity to take them through that really fast straight, really fast corner. And these cars have been designed to be amazing through the fast corners. So
now
we are going to see them flat out through that corner. It's going to be spectacular.
So I think the big difference now between now and a few years ago is the cars actually can follow a lot better. I think this year proved that the new rules, whatever we think about them in other areas and the way they make the cars behave in certain corners, they can definitely follow more closely through the medium and high speed. So that will no longer be a problem that needs solving as much through the final sector at Barcelona. So there we go. That's a good thing. And actually, I've just realised, I think the picture I put up here, Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the next thing. I think this picture is actually wrong.
It's the
I
wrong
don't
corner.
That isn't even
That's the corner they changed at turn 10.
Yeah, but it's obviously deliberate. I mean, this is a left-hander. I'm talking about a corner that's 3 on from me. It's a change that happened at Barcelona.
But I also don't like that change.
Most people are watching this on phones anyway. They can't really see that.
I don't like that change that they made last year for that corner, because that again actually takes away what was a good overtaking opportunity, because you've got a fast section that leads into a heavy braking zone, which leads for overtaking. And it was one of the key overtaking spots on the circuit. But now it's a left sweeper, in effect. You can't have a lunge at somebody on the brakes. So
yeah, so that's gone the
give
other
them
way.
with one hand and taken away with the other.
Yeah, so that corner that they changed, turn 10, I think we were looking at there,
Mm-hmm.
that hairpin left as it was, is now too fast. It's kind of, now that's too much of a sweeper. Whereas the good thing about
It's in the wrong
before
place.
that was a good, really heavy braking point. And the reason that's different to the final corners, where we don't like the slow ones, is because that's a sequence of slow corners. A right, left, right. It's this kind of little S of slow. That really screws things up. When you've got a very slow corner after a very, very fast section, that's different, because that's a big braking zone, and that will give you an overtaking opportunity. But anyway, yeah, that's gone as well now.
I mean, listen, it is, again, we're talking about sims, but it is a fantastic circuit to drive. Pretty much every car, I think.
In a fast car, for sure.
But to be fair, I think every single car I've driven in a sim around that circuit, I absolutely adore it. I mean, listen, I know it like the back of my hand, because we've all driven it. You know, me and you have driven that in racing games since we were kids. So we know it very well. That and Spa and Suzuka.
So the next thing on our agenda isn't a current news item. Actually, I'm pretty happy we've had decent amounts of current news to talk about. But we've said we were going to plan to do this for a couple of weeks, and that is a proper history with Alex and Brad. And I should get a jingle for that. But knowing our luck, the jingle
with Alex and Brad.
There we go. That's it. I'll record you saying that. Because if I had a button for it, it would just probably make my computer crash or something. This would just all shut down. But I asked you via text earlier today, and you very helpfully completely ignored me.
I was at a meeting.
I asked you.
I was at a very, very important meeting about air source heat pumps and boilers with it.
I asked you, do you know much about the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix? So you can answer me now.
I do. I know
you do? Okay, that's great. So did you watch it live?
I would have done.
And I don't mean at Monaco. I mean, did you see it on the telly?
I would have done. I mean, in 1996, I was 12. So whether I was following it with intent that I do now, but I've watched enough. I've watched enough documentaries and things, because it is a very, very well documented race for the absolute madness that happened during that.
So there's actually too many things really to talk about that happened in this race, but I've set up a few little kind of illustrative photos to help us along the way. So you've admitted that you're a very old person. You were 12 when this race is on. I would have been 10.
Yeah,
nearly
I'm 18 months older than you.
Yeah, so I can't remember it as well, but I was at my Auntie Min's house. So like that's one of those aunties that isn't a real auntie. It's like
friend
a
of the family,
friend of my grandparents.
Auntie out of respect.
And this is back when it was Formula One was shown on BBC, I believe. Commentary with 1996. It would have been, I believe, Murray Walker on his own. I don't think Jonathan Palmer was doing it in 96 because I don't remember him. I think it was before that. In fact, I didn't even know Jonathan Palmer did Formula One commentary until I worked for him. So that was a revelation.
He was a good commentator. I like Jonathan.
Someone can tell me if I'm wrong, and he was commentating. I was just ignoring him, and I thought he was Murray Walker as well. Maybe I just didn't think their voices were different. But anyway, Murray Walker was commentating, and I was a massive Damon Hill fan, and I knew that Connor Edwards saying I would have been -6. Shut up, Connor. No one likes you. And I remember really supporting Damon Hill. I knew he hadn't won this race. Really wanted him to win the championship. He did ultimately go on to win that championship, but Monaco was one where I think he was really clear. And my key memory is Damon Hill's engine blowing up coming out of the tunnel. But that's kind of jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit. So I'm going to try and you can fill in any gaps here. And this is a history lesson for all the new fans. I'm sure there are some pretty recent fans watching this. We've got over 50 people watching us live at the moment, which is a big uptick from last week. So thanks for sticking with us, guys. I know the tech issues have been rubbish, but we will fix it.
Especially because we haven't got the Twitter space this week because of a technical issue which we're trying to solve. So we're going to park it until we've solved it.
So I guess out of those people that are watching and the people that will watch this during the week, there will be some newish fans that won't know anything about this race. So let me set the scene. Here's a picture of turn 1. Now, I believe only 16 cars finished the first lap. So it was a damp to wet race at the beginning, and some stuff happened. People crashed on the first lap. But I think the really unlikely thing was that at some point, Michael Schumacher...
Can I stop you before we get actually into the actual... Andrea Montemini actually crashed on the warm-up lap.
Oh.
So on the way to the grid, Montemini crashed on the warm-up lap, and we lost Jos Verstappen, Fisichella, Pedro Lamy, Rubens Barrichello, and Schumacher all on the first lap.
Schumacher was the first lap too. Right, okay, so I have a vague memory of this. And I also already didn't like Michael Schumacher. I did like him in his later years at Mercedes and, in, I guess...
When he was less of a supervillain.
But yeah, to me, he was the baddie. He was the one that was against Damon Hill the previous couple of years.
He's the one that put Damon Hill in the wall with 1994.
So I was happy that Schumacher was out. So there we go. So you've set the scene. Now this is the race where Coulthard was wearing Schumacher's helmet that I got wrong last week. And I thought this picture...
That's where this has come from. You're still trying to get vindication for your error.
Well, not really. I just came across this photograph here showing David Coulthard very clearly with Michael Schumacher's helmet driving a McLaren, which is such a weird... apart from the Marlboro sponsorship, which kind of looks correct on there, that helmet doesn't belong in a McLaren. But...
And this was also the year, if you go back to that picture, Brad...
Yeah.
This was also the year where McLaren were experimenting with this rear wing on the engine cover, which lots of people protested as saying illegal, but there was room for it. However, the reason nobody went for it is it actually created more drag and made the car less efficient and didn't give effective performance downforce, and it actually ruined the balance of the car, which made the car really difficult.
But Monaco, dirty downforce is fine, isn't it? So you can stick it on.
No, but it affects the balance. That was the problem.
Was it the Tyrrell?
It caused balance issues.
Was there a Tyrrell in this race? I think I'm right. I think there was a Tyrrell here that had like extra side
X-wings.
X-wings, yeah, something like that. Anyway, so basically a bunch of people crashed, which meant Damon Hill was out clear. He was definitely going to win this race that his dad was so successful at. I think he had the record. Maybe he still has the record of number of wins here, unless maybe
6 times.
Something like that. Anyway, disaster for little 10-year-old Brad. Loads of smoke out the back. They exit the tunnel. Damon Hill is out. Here's Damon Hill. This is before he was out. How cool is that car? So he's out. And that then left just a few people in the race. And in fact, I believe at the end, it might have been 4 cars classified, but I think only 3 cars finished the race.
Yep.
Which is, I think, the record.
Yep.
And the person who won, and it's going France's way today, isn't it? In more ways than one, it was Olivier Panis who won his one and only race of his career. And I think I was really happy about that. I was really pleased. He managed to hold off. Was
David Coulthard?
Coulthard. Who else finished?
He beat Coulthard by 4.8 seconds, and Johnny Herbert in the Sauber was 37 seconds behind, and it was Frentzen who was 4th. But did retire in the pits, so he was allowed.
Yeah, and so there's that thing where if you retire near enough to the end, you kind of get to keep that as a finish. But yeah, that was just a cool, crazy race. And I don't think I appreciated at the time how crazy that was. But the next time we'd see so few cars in a race was probably the infamous Indianapolis Michelin problem race, which I don't even remember what year that was. Was that 2003?
Can't remember.
Maybe that's
3-4, because that was the year that it was, because the crash was Ralf Schumacher, BMW, wasn't it?
Yes, that's not in BMW.
Was it a BMW or was it the Williams or the Sauber?
I think he was in the Toyota. Ralph
maybe, I
Schumacher
can't
in the
remember.
Toyota.
Just to give you an idea of the
So maybe it was 2005. Maybe that means it was 2005 at Indianapolis. Sorry, carry on.
of the 22 people in that race, 14 of them crashed.
Okay.
When was the last time we had that many? And I think this is another show of how much better drivers are these days than back when. Because
So just to
you
be
just
fair,
do not get... even in
the
these
cars
conditions,
were probably harder. It was tricky conditions. The tyres wouldn't have been as good. And Monaco itself was less forgiving. Sorry, did I just suddenly get really loud then, Alex?
No, I have cramp.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
That's what you get for playing football. I'm just going to stand up for a second.
So Connor Edwards is
sort the cramp
confirming
out.
it was
That's what happens when you're
2005. So yeah, Monaco was less forgiving. There are places now where, although Monaco is still very unforgiving, there are places where the barriers are a bit further away. It was probably easier to crash back then and harder to drive the cars, but still, that's a pretty low hit rate, isn't it, for finishers in anyone's book?
I mean, it does open this conversation. We've had this conversation about sports people and in particular drivers being better these days and how you can't go back 10, 15 years and find a grid of drivers as an average better then than we have now. Because
People will
drivers
hate
are
us for
so...
this.
Pardon?
So people will hate us for this, but
They
I
absolutely
agree with
will.
you.
They absolutely will. But they are so much more prepared now. I mean, Damon Hill, perfect example. You know, I was a Damon Hill fan too. Love watching him race, but I didn't find this out until I was older and understood the sport more. But Damon didn't jump in an F1 car until his 30s. He never did karting. He raced motorbikes and then somehow managed to jump into an F1 seat and just so happened to end up at Williams when they had an unstoppable car.
Damon Hill's story still stuns me today that he was able without... I mean, I know he did some motorbike racing, but even that wasn't until... It wasn't at a particularly high level. It wasn't until he was quite old.
He wasn't interested in motorsport because of his dad.
The Damon Hill story I find bizarre because I don't see how someone can get good enough to drive a Formula One car even reasonably competitively starting that late. I just don't get it. And the only way I can rationalise that is that, okay, his car was really good, but I mean, he didn't always have a brilliant car, and he still drove quite well in other years. He still didn't
great
look like
in
an idiot.
Arrows, didn't he?
He was still, yeah, exactly. He was still obviously like pretty good.
One in the Jordan.
The only way I can rationalise it is that the rest of the drivers must not have been as good as we expect drivers to be today. So, and maybe Schumacher was the first of the newer breed of the real professionals. But I don't know. I can't wrap my head around the Damon Hill story.
Let's look at this grid then for this 1996 race, right? Starting at the bottom, Andrea Montemini. I mean, I don't remember it. Apart from his name, I don't remember much about anything he did.
As far as we know, some of these people may well have been world karting champions back in those days. So we don't know, but yeah.
But from what they did and what they achieved and the length of time in the sport, Jos Verstappen, we know Jos was a really good karter, but then just couldn't make it with it. But by the way, there are lots of people who are really, really good karters who just can't make it in Formula One.
Liuzzi
you'll know his name. The Italian guy who was an amazing...
Vince Antonio Liuzzi?
No, younger guy, older guy than that. Pantano.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Giorgio Pantano was an absolute boss in a go-kart.
I've raced him. I've raced him at the World Championship at KWC.
Okay,
he was really good there as well.
Exactly. So
I've been bowling with Giorgio Pantano. There we go. There's a story for you, and he beat me at that as well.
Yeah, you're not. You don't eat meat. You're not. But yeah, and Giorgio was pinned to be the next big thing in Formula One, and just never made it work. Stoffel Van Dorn, even in recent times, was pinned to be this absolute prodigy, and then got obliterated by Alonso and destroyed all of his credibility.
And you'd have to say that Stoffel Van Dorn must be a much better driver than Damon Hill ever was. He just must have been. He had so much more experience by the time he drove a Formula One car than Hill had ever. In fact, the GP2 cars, or I guess, was it Formula 2 by the time Stoffel drove it? I think it might have still been GP2. The GP2 cars he drove were almost certainly quicker than the Formula 1 cars
Absolutely.
Hill raced. And he would have been racing against a faster field of drivers, who had come from simulators and karting, and fitness, all that kind of thing. There's just no way Stoffel Vandoorne isn't and wasn't, when he did his first season in Formula 1, vastly better at driving a Formula 1 car than Damon Hill. Yet Damon Hill was one of the stars of the 90s. So I can't hold these two things simultaneously in my mind without thinking that the general skill level just must have been lower. Less of a pool coming in at the bottom end. The sport's less popular, and so that fewer people are coming in, and therefore fewer people get to the top and are filtered out along the way.
To give you a contrast, Fernando Alonso, right? And I believe after Schumacher, Alonso was like the next in line in the new breed. Despite how much I don't like Fernando Alonso, I do appreciate how good the guy is. But he got his first go-kart when he was 4. It was actually a present for his older sister who didn't want it. So Fernando said he wanted it, and he had been racing and driving karts since he was 4 years old, training and in the car on the track almost every single day, because I think they had a track or something like that. You can't tell me that doesn't make you better than a Mika Hakkinen even. Mika Hakkinen was one of the greats of the day, one of the guys that Schumacher said that he was scared of. But again, Hakkinen didn't get into it until he was older. A lot of these guys, Eddie Irvine, perfect example. Eddie Irvine was a playboy, had some money, he was rubbish, but he managed to work his way into a decent car and gain a couple of good results. But he couldn't even win a championship in a much, much, much better Ferrari. What year was it that Schumacher broke his legs?
1999.
99, yeah.
I watched that happen.
And and even with Schumacher's help, he couldn't, at the end of the season, he couldn't win the championship. So,
and
at least Schumacher helped his teammate.
Mika Salo's help as well, as was pointed out to us on an earlier episode, where Salo had to give up his only chance at a win in Formula 1 because Salo was standing in for Schumacher and he gave it up for Irvine to win. Anyway, we're going off on loads of 90s F1 tangents, but that's our era, isn't it? Like end of the 90s and into the 2000s. That's when we were young and enjoying Formula 1.
It is, but it's also that case of, as we said, we've got many. We're going to get even more because the next season, Drive to Survive, is going to drop any minute. So we're going to get even more people watching the sport, but they don't know some of the history. And I think if they enjoy the sport enough, I'd like to think they want to know some of the history, because anything that I watch, I always want to know what's happened in the past because it helps me appreciate the now. But for me, in this era that we were looking at Formula One, the reason Schumacher stands out so much comes down to, and I solely believe, on his fitness. He was the only person who took fitness seriously. He travelled with his own.
So fitness, definitely, but also karting from a really young age at a high level. His dad.
He was racing DTM, wasn't he?
I don't know whether Schumacher ever raced DTM. He was racing endurance. He was racing the equivalent of World Endurance Championship. But Schumacher's dad had a kart track. There's lots of videos of him and Ralph driving karts from a very young age. So that, plus being very dedicated and being very fit. And this does lead to the question. We've been saying people from the 90s effectively suck. But then what do we think about Schumacher and Senna? Stuart Neal asks, in this context, how do we rate Senna versus Vandoorne? So this is tough. So and so let's give some context here. Jonathan Palmer, we mentioned him earlier in the show. He was an average to competent F1 driver.
He won a race, didn't he?
No.
Did he not?
No, he didn't win a Formula 1 race.
Who am I thinking won a race?
Maybe John Watson, you might be thinking
John Watson.
But Palmer was at one point a test driver for McLaren, at the same time that Senna was a race driver for McLaren. And there's a story, and I heard this whilst I was working for Jonathan, that he was Palmer was at Silverstone testing for McLaren back in the days where you could do hundreds of laps. Did a couple of days, and I might be doing him a disservice, but this is the way I heard the story. Did a couple of days worth of testing, set whatever lap time. Senna then flew in to do the end of the test, jumped in Jonathan's car, and immediately in the very first run beat him by multiple seconds. So multiple seconds shows you that the gap between kind of, a normal F1 driver of the day and someone who is top level is a big gulf, and maybe the Sennas and Schumachers, who are very exceptional in that
generational talents,
maybe they are at a similar level to what we think of as current professional level. Obviously, if you stuck them now, even at their young age, if you stuck them in a modern F1 car, probably not going to be as quick as current drivers would be in them, because they've grown up driving different breeds of car. So it wouldn't really be a fair fight. And obviously, if you did it now, those drivers would be, well, in those two instances, that would be very unfair. But drivers of that era would be too old to give a fair comparison. But I think maybe they're exceptions. Maybe a Senna and a Schumacher are exceptions to this thing we're talking about. And maybe they would be really good now if they were born the same time as Lance Stroll was born.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
I think there is an element of natural talent and things in there that can be worked on. But I think it's. What's the word? What's a better way of phrasing it?
So the way I think what people mean by natural talent is obviously a physical ability. You have to have arms that are long enough, legs that are long enough. You need to not have a medical condition that prevents you from doing it. So physically able is the first thing, and opportunity to practice at a young age, and will and dedication. I think those three things are what people mislabel as natural talent, and it just looks natural because they've got those three things: the ability, the opportunity, and the will.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking two examples outside of F1. Ed Sheeran, for example, I'm a big Ed Sheeran fan. I really like it. But he played a clip of himself singing when he was younger, when he was trying to get into it on, I think, Ross, and it was horrific. And he had to learn how to sing. And then you've got Cristiano Ronaldo. He has that very unique method of taking a free kick, where he kicks it in a very weird way. The way he plants his foot is very, very strange. That doesn't just happen. That is hours and hours and hours of practice on the training field, trying to master that and figure out the science of how you hit the ball in a particular way to make it bend in the particular way. And that's what these guys do. Max Verstappen is a perfect example. He's been karting since he was a kid, karting in amazing equipment with a dad who was very, very well informed on everything that's going to go with it. So he had the best guidance as far as racing is concerned on the way up to that. And then what does Max do in his free time when he's not racing Formula One cars? He's on iRacing. He's doing he was doing the Spa 24-hour between a couple of races, and I guarantee you he'll be doing the Daytona 24-hour on iRacing at the end of January, because that's also his hobby.
So people could look at Verstappen as an example and say, yeah, well, his parents were both race drivers, so he's inherited a natural ability to race. And I would say, no, what he's inherited is a family that have enough money and will to put him through loads of practice at a really young age, and a desire drilled into him through his parents and through the environment he's been raised in to want to be successful at it, and therefore the opportunity and all the other things I was talking about kind of arise from that, and so he's made the most of it. So he's kind of had the ideal upbringing. Actually, I think in a way that if Jos was more successful, he wouldn't have had. I think Jos probably put more effort into Max's career because he knew where he'd gone wrong. And quite often you see the second generation not be quite as successful as the first. When you look at, I guess, well, Rosberg probably did better actually than Keke ultimately. Keke didn't. I think did he only win one race? I know he won the championship.
In his championship year, he won.
So Rosberg did exceed his dad. But let's think of.
Oh, no doubt. I actually think we missed the ability to appreciate Rosberg when he was racing with Hamilton, because I actually think Rosberg was much better than we actually gave him credit for.
Yeah, I think maybe you're right. Mr. AJ Scotty has messaged with the quote, "The more I practice, the luckier I get." And I agree with that too.
You make your own luck.
Practice makes better than you were before you practiced. I heard a quote today. It was probably a TikTok video that I then saw through YouTube or Facebook because I'm old. And it said the difference between an amateur and a professional is an amateur practices to get to reduce the mistakes, and a professional practices to make sure they couldn't make a mistake. It's something like that. I'm terribly misquoting that, but yeah, practice is the key.
Comes down to that 10,000 hours thing,
and it's practice, but practice whilst really wanting the thing that you're practicing for, like paying attention whilst you're practicing. I'm just trying to think of some other second generation drivers. Recently, obviously, we've got Mick Schumacher, like not remotely the same success level as his dad. Damon Hill, not as successful as his dad. I mean, again, different eras. Hill may well have been better than Graham.
Josh Hill, which is Damon's son, couldn't even get.
That's third generation, and he had so little will to continue it that despite having contracts signed and loads of opportunity, he then decided he just wants to go off and do drumming instead.
But it's part of the reason that someone like Lewis Hamilton has the drive, because he came from nothing. He had all the diversity issues, being the only black family basically in motorsport, with lots of abuse being hurled at him, being told he can't do it, shouldn't be there, blah blah blah, and all the racist abuse that he received. So that gave him that will and that desire and that drive that he still seems to have.
Yeah, I think
he doesn't want to go anywhere.
Hamilton has the biggest example of the will element of this little package that I've been saying that you need to end up with natural talent.
It's an iron will, isn't it? It seems unbreaking.
Michael Jones says to him, natural talent is where your baseline is on your first attempt at the sport. And I'd say, okay, you can define it like that, but your baseline at your first attempt at the sport is defined by those three things that I said. The first time you get to, when you do your first Formula One race or your first car race, you will have had formative years that were defined by the amount you got to practice, etc., and how much you cared and what your guidance was, all those kind of things. I think Hamilton has his will portion of this little group of things you need is bigger than other people, whereas maybe some other things weren't as big. Maybe the opportunity wasn't as big. Maybe he didn't get to do as many practice laps because maybe he couldn't afford to or whatever. But he made up for that in the other areas. So,
if we did a comment of the week, that goes to Simon Blackburn. Josh to Damon. Sorry, Dad. I marched to the beat of.
Yeah, we've got a couple of other examples. Jolyon Palmer being a second generation. We already said Jonathan probably wasn't the best ever. Jolyon was probably a better driver than Jonathan. They both won the Formula 2 championship. I guess it was GP2 when Jolyon won it.
Yes. But Jolyon had been in GP2 for a long time and won in not a very strong... best team, sorry.
But you could probably argue that when Jonathan won it back in the 80s... there may well not have been remotely the same skill level of the rest of the field.
It wasn't as professional as it is now.
It's another decade further back than when we were saying the 90s drivers probably weren't that good. So, Connor mentions Bruno Senna. He wasn't obviously the son of Ayrton, but he was the next generation, and again, not remotely as good, probably despite having more opportunity because there would have been money in the family. Although I think Ayrton also had some money behind him. Back in the day.
But you talk about that whole thing of the difference between Michael Schumacher and Ralf. Two brothers in the sport at the same time. And Ralf was good, but he was never a patch on Michael.
Yeah.
Was never even, there was never any question. Even though when Schumacher was testing in his early days, he was asked, they told him he was quick. He said, if you think I'm quick, you should see my brother.
So now that's maybe a good counter to my position. Could you say then that Ralf, who had effectively almost the same environment growing up as Michael, was Ralph just not as naturally gifted as Michael? That's a tricky one. I still would say that there will be things in their formative years that Michael had that Ralph didn't get the opportunity, because Michael was first. Maybe more effort was put into his career, maybe because Michael had already had a lot of success by the time Ralph came in, maybe he'd been able to trade off of the Schumacher reputation a little bit more on his way up through the ranks. He was a few years behind Michael.
I don't think he was as driven.
Yes,
he was much more he was much boy lifestyle. And embarrassing to admit this, but years and years and years ago, I read Jordan's autobiography, and unfortunately not Eddie Jordan. I mean,
so you mean Katie
Jordan.
Price?
Katie Price, because he dated Katie Price.
Who did? Oh, Ralph Schumacher.
Ralph Schumacher dated Katie Price. Okay,
well, she was a promo girl for Jordan, and Ralph Schumacher drove for Jordan, so that'll be where that connection comes from.
Yep. So
in fact, did she get her name Jordan, her model name, because she was a promo girl for Jordan?
I don't remember. I read this book.
Okay.
And back when I would read the actual book, it wasn't even an audiobook, Brad. I actually read it.
Okay.
And there was a whole story about them hiring the entirety of a hotel floor and trashing it, and basically spending more time in the bedroom than doing other things that he probably should have been doing for his Formula One career, which I don't think his brother would have been.
I don't think Michael would have done. I think he might well have. He was partial to a party or two, but kind of after the hard work was done. And on that topic, AW says, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. That's a great quote.
That's a brilliant quote. I like that. The other one who was a playboy and didn't have the drive and probably could have been better was Jenson Button. Jenson Button, in his early career, loved the money, loved the parties. You read his book, it's all in there. You can read from there. His main thing was enjoying the playboy lifestyle. And listen, you're driving F1 cars, you're earning millions. Bloody enjoy it. But what do you want? Do you want the enjoying part of it, or do you want the legacy and the titles and that kind of thing? And maybe Jenson could have been better if he'd been a bit more focused. And I bet there's lots of people like that. But I bet there's someone like Rubens Barrichello, and I bet Rubens was super, super focused. And he did a lot of the testing for Ferrari. He set the car up. Schumacher apparently wasn't very good at setting the car up, and Rubens worked with him a lot to get the setups of the car right. But Rubens just never had that raw speed to be able to actually cause Schumacher a problem. Even when he was up against Jenson Button, nowhere.
Just lacking a tiny little bit. Oh, I've just smashed my microphone in a very Alex Van Gien way. Another couple of examples of second-generation drivers. Pietro Fittipaldi, not as good as his dad. Michael Andretti, not as good as his dad. And you could maybe argue that in a different way to him, we've said that maybe Jolyon was actually better than Jonathan Palmer. I think maybe Mario Andretti really was better than, despite doing it a couple of decades earlier. Andretti was driving modern era McLaren at Laguna Seca recently, and giving it
very
some beans
impressed by that
in his 80s.
Mm-hmm. But it's like
he loves it.
Years ago, there was an episode of Top Gear where Jackie Stewart was coaching James May in a TVR.
Yeah, I remember this at Alton Park.
And I mean, I remember one of the things I learned. This was early in me learning to kart, and I didn't start karting until my 20s.
I know what you're going to say, and it's actually wrong, but say it anyway.
Which is, and I do still think about this, don't get on the throttle, never get off of it. Which, it's a sweeping statement, but it is broadly correct, but it's not always correct.
Yeah.
But what it does is it just means don't get on the throttle, get off the throttle, get on the throttle, because it unbalances the car. That's what he means by that. And I actually met him at Daytona Milton Keynes, and I told him that I read that piece of feedback, and he was a very, very nice man about it.
There are a few things like that we as race instructors say as a general comment to people who are at a certain stage of their driving development that when you drill down into it, they're not necessarily correct in the way that you're portraying, but you say them as a means to an end. Because, and I'm sure this is the same I'm sure skydiving instructors say this, I'm sure football instructor says this. There's probably loads of different, probably in any kind of skill that you're trying to teach someone who's at a lowish level, there are easier ways to get going and to generally do things right. And then once they're getting that element right, you say, right, all that stuff I told you about, always do X. That's not strictly true, but it got you to the next level. And that Jackie Stewart quote of never apply the throttle unless you know you're not going to have to come off the throttle is, or never apply the throttle unless you know you can stay on it. That's like generally true, but actually, you quite often will try, because you need the way you find the limit is by just trying to go over and then reducing, unless you just like happen to judge it perfectly every single time.
It's like when they say break in a straight line.
Exactly. Always break in a straight line. Breaking
in a straight line is fine.
That's the best example.
It means you will get stopped for the corner. You've got less of a chance of spinning. You'll probably enter the corner at the right kind of speed to get through the corner safely. But we all know, when we've been racing a little while, you trail brake all the way through the corner as much as you possibly can. And for those that don't know, trail braking is bleeding off the brakes while turning the steering wheel. So you are braking and turning at the same time. But as you turn more, you brake less. What was it? Something you said? It's like having a piece of rope.
This is
between
a
the
real
brake pedal and the steering wheel.
It's actually it's the throttle and the steering wheel. So that training element, imagine you've got a piece of string tied between the steering wheel and the throttle pedal, so that you can't get the power down until the wheel is straight. And when the wheel's straight, you've got enough string to push the pedal down. And then the more you turn the wheel, the more the pedal has to come up. That's another way of trying to get people to visualize. God, I could do this all day. I could talk about driving dynamics all day, but we're well over our hour, Alex, and we've exhausted our weekly topics. So we should probably let everyone go to bed.
Yes.
And we should probably do the same. But just before we go, looking forward to seeing you this weekend for the unofficial Missed Apex Christmas party. And the reason I say unofficial is because everyone except Spanners and Trumpets, Spanners because he's in Spain, Trumpets because he lives in New York, everyone except them. Oh, and Jono, because Jono lives in Australia.
Yes,
all the people who are really far away obviously aren't coming. All the UK-based Missed Apex people.
How many of us are coming actually now? We worked out a final number.
I mean, I guess I can probably say the names, because it's not like people don't know the Missed Apex crew. It's you and me. It's Rich Molden, who isn't a panelist, but he's very much a member of the crew behind the scenes for various things.
He's Mr. Race Cup that we do for the Missed Apex iRacing series.
It is Antonia. It's
Frank
Stuffy, who is also Kyle Power, obviously. Can't forget
Obviously.
Kyle. Who else do we have out of our crew? I think then maybe it's partners after that.
Yeah.
I've got some great games planned. So I think I might have mentioned this last week, but we've got a quiz. We're doing a Formula One quiz, which I've made. Lots of contributors from F1 Twitter. And a couple of celebs in there as well, like genuine celebs, asking the questions a la Big Fat Quiz of the Year for those Brits that watch that on Channel 4 each year.
I love that show.
Americans looking at us confused, no idea what we're on about. And that video, once we've done our quiz, I will then make that live on YouTube on this channel that you're watching this on now, and you can all have a go at the quiz as well. I was thinking about editing out the bits where the celebs say, I hope you're having a good time at the Missed Apex Christmas party. But I could just leave that in. It might just confuse people. People who don't know what I'm on about might be watching this F1 quiz and go,
What's Missed Apex?
What's Missed Apex?
But you should all go and download Missed Apex. Awesome. We love it.
Yeah, subscribe to Missed Apex on your podcatcher of choice. Anyway, looking forward to seeing you.
We will also have some interesting things to talk to you guys about next week, because on Tuesday, Tuesday is Brad's birthday, and
I'm 26.
Yeah, something like that. Me, Brad, Johnny Elliott, Chris Stevens, and Rich Molden, and your brother, are all going to the F1 Arcade.
F1 Arcade next to St Paul's Cathedral in central London.
And it's like one of the very first days that it's properly open to the public, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it opened this week, so it's very, very new. So
we'll give a rundown or a review on that, mate.
They had some technical issues like we have. So
really, who honestly could possibly go live on anything with technical issues? It's a disgrace. However, there is also a high, because there might be a chance
you cut out and whatever you said.
I said there might be a chance we could also be quite hungover, because I don't know how much time we're going to have to recuperate from your party, and then we're going out drinking again on Tuesday.
It's a couple of days afterwards, but yeah, hopefully we'll be okay. I've got stuff
yeah, but
to
we're
do
really old,
then.
Brad.
Yeah,
these things last for a long.
That is true.
I think for every, I think we need to make like a thing for like every lap we have a spin or go off track. You got to take a shot or something while driving.
You are going to be absolutely hammered using that metric, and I'll get to
it's
see
one
your
of those things that will just get worse
car.
and worse.
So I think maybe we'll leave it there and let people go. Sorry, we said we were going about 10 minutes ago. So all that leaves me to do is press the outro button. Thank you very much for watching, and join us again next week, which I believe will be the same day, Alex.
Wednesday next week.
Yeah, so we'll try and do it, and we'll try and iron out even more. There were fewer technical issues this week, even though we had half an hour of them before the show started.
Yeah.
So let's
if you hadn't dicked about with the chat, there wouldn't have been any problem.
Yeah. Oh, and the reason the chat was wrong at the start is purely because I've changed that since we last did it. That will now never change again. So
you say that about the microphone every week.
And I'll get a new microphone as well. And there's actually a spare one.
Your mic's definitely broken.
There's a spare one over here, this RGB thing here behind me. But I'll use that next week. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for another full chat. Bye.